Hello, everybody. My name is Akhil Bagul, and in this podcast, I'll be discussing the legacy of a person who I think deserves the title of the most influential person in American history. No politician throughout history has ever played a more crucial role within the government than the person who I'll be talking about. This person served in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate, as well as taking on the role of Secretary of State under John Quincy Adams. His actions prevented the separation of the newly formed United States, and his excellent statesmanship allowed for him to protect the fragile balance between the North and the South. Known as the Great Compromiser or the Great Pacificator, Henry Clay is without question one of the most influential men to serve in Congress. Beginning in his career as an attorney, Clay began to rise up the social ladder by earning money through lawsuit claims in Kentucky. He strengthened his social class when he married the daughter of a wealthy businessman, with whom he would remain married for until his death 50 years later. He served as a lawyer for Aaron Burr. However, when he found out that Burr was really guilty of his crimes, he let the case go. In 1803, he received his first taste of politics when he was elected to the Kentucky General Assembly. His popularity began to grow as people became fond of his Jeffersonian-like policy positions. During his time in the state government, Clay liberalized the Constitution of Kentucky, and he was also a strong opponent of the Alien and Sedition Acts passed by President John Adams. Soon after, in 1806, he was elected to serve in the Senate to represent Kentucky, and in 1811 he was elected to serve in the House of Representatives, where he would soon become the House Speaker. He was a war hawk who wanted to fight Britain and stop the oppression of American sailors. Clay's influence as a war hawk led the United States to declare war and to secure a long-lasting independence from Great Britain. After the war had ended, President James Madison appointed Clay and 4 others to negotiate a peace treaty again between Britain and the United States. After the war, Clay spearheaded change on many fronts. During his term as Secretary of State, he pushed for independence for Latin American countries and developed economic ties with many of the surrounding countries. He oversaw 12 different commercial treaties, which was more than any other previous administration. With Clay as Secretary of State, the British government also agreed to pay off the cost of slaves that were freed during the War of 1812. On the economic front, Clay is best known for his nationalistic plan termed the American System. His goal was to create an economic system that would allow American business to flourish. The plan consisted of 3 goals. The first was to protect American industry by placing a tariff on imported goods. The second was to create a national bank of the United States to store the money and regulate federal funding. And the third was to fund the improvement of internal infrastructure, such as bridges, roads, and canals. These ideals were soon incorporated into the new party called the Whig Party. Clay was the unofficial leader and founder of this party, which was able to place 4 presidents in office. During his time in the government, Clay also ran on the Whig Party presidential ticket 5 times before his death, all unsuccessfully. In fact, the only time he served in the executive branch was as Secretary of State under Adams, which he obtained through what was known as the corrupt bargain. These actions taken by Clay were extremely influential to the success of the United States. However, they were not the most influential that Clay took during his career. Henry Clay was most well known for his compromising ability. His first major congressional compromise came in 1820 and was known as the Missouri Compromise. This bill was the first major appeasement measure to decrease tensions between the pro- and anti-slavery factions in Congress. It allowed for the admittance of 2 new states, Maine, which was the free state, and Missouri, which was the slave state. It also banned slavery north of the 36th 30-degree latitude line. Clay was able to keep the balance between slave and free states, and was also able to ban slavery in certain parts of the United States. His next major compromise was regarding the nullification crisis and the tariff of abominations. With growing tensions between the Jackson administration and South Carolina, a quick and effective solution is required to prevent secession or civil war. Yet again, Henry Clay was able to draft a bill that appeased both sides of the crisis. Working with John C. Calhoun from South Carolina, the Compromise of 1833 stated that the tariff rates would be lowered over the next 10 years. which would mean that South Carolinians would pay less and would be appeased. This was enough to settle the conflict and end the nullification crisis. The last major compromise that Clay drafted was the Compromise of 1850. This agreement is the most substantial and is what most likely delayed the occurrence of the Civil War. The first dispute settled was the conflict over the land obtained in the Mexican-American War. It was decided that California would be admitted as a free state, and Utah and New Mexico territories would be decided by popular sovereignty, which was created by Henry Clay's trainee Stephen Douglas. The Texas and New Mexico border dispute was settled, and the slave trade was terminated in Washington, D.C. A version of the Fugitive Slave Law was included, which made it easier for slave owners to recover runaway slaves. This compromise was able to decrease conflict within the different factions in Congress, and solve problems that arose from the Mexican-American War. The Compromise of 1850 was the last of Henry Clay's legacy. He was regarded by the public and by fellow politicians as an excellent statesman. Even the young congressman from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, admired Clay and claimed that he was the ideal statesman. Clay's influence was so large that during the time of his death, his body was sent to all major cities across the United States for mourning, and he was finally laid in the Capitol Rotunda, the first to ever receive that honor. Clay was the definition of American ideology. He believed in freedom, business, and strong cooperation among the people, in the government, and in the public. His influence created a stronger economy and held the nation together during times of deep disparities. He was without doubt one of the most influential people to